My first test is actually being able to identify who is Cameron and who is Tyler. This is Tyler. I was right. Hi. And this is Cameron. Guys, I think a lot of people have heard of Bitcoin or familiar with this term. It pops up in popular culture. It pops up in TV shows now. They'll have references to it. But I wonder whether people really understand what it is. So I'd like you guys to start out by just framing it. What exactly, how do you explain Bitcoin in everyman, layman's terms?
Sorry, Bitcoin's like digital gold, but you can send it across the internet just like you can send an email. That's probably the simplest way to understand Bitcoin right now.
When you say like digital gold, what are the parallels between the two? What are the similarities?
It's scarce. It's an asset. It has intrinsic value. It can also be a form of currency. So it can. So Bitcoin is like commodity money, like gold is commodity money.
And I think there's sort of two aspects. There's the asset aspect of a fixed store of value, and then there's also the technology or protocol of Bitcoin, and what Tyler was talking about earlier, which is the ability to basically send money over the internet. So if you think, if we sort of step back to originally we used snail mail, the U.S. Postal System, then FedEx and UPS came along, of course, but ultimately, SMTP was this protocol that allowed us to send email over the internet. And then taking it to sort of voice calls, we used to use long-distance bell companies. Then voice over IP came and allowed us to send voice over the internet through Skype. And the HTTP, of course, itself is a protocol which has allowed us to basically consume media and commerce over the internet. So the Bitcoin protocol effectively brings this promise of allowing to share, essentially receive and send money over the internet, which really hasn't existed prior to its existence, and I think is one of the last steps in terms of innovation.
Yeah, so what are the advantages of that sort of flexibility, having a flexible virtual currency like that? Like, what can you do with it that we're not able to do right now?
Well, it's frictionless and it's instant, so I can send money to Hong Kong and back for free. I can't do that now. I have to go through, the current banking system is very balkanized, and so the legacy rails, there's a lot of, it's expensive, so Western Union is double-digit charge, and it's slow. Just like if you were sending a parcel across country or across to Europe with some sort of post service, it would be a lot slower than an email, which we could send back and forth probably 1 million times in the time that an actual physical, the same physical piece of paper moved back and forth.
And to sort of give a real-world example, let's say you were in a foreign country and it was a Saturday afternoon, you lost your wallet, and all of a sudden you really are out of luck. You have no way to get around or pay for things. So even if you were wait till your bank branch were to open on a Monday, you're still out of luck for 24, 48 hours before you can kind of start figuring out how to get the wire over. And then there might still be another delay. There's time zones issues. So it could take you days to figure that out. With Bitcoin, if you said, hey, Cameron, I ran into a jam. Can I borrow some money? I can send you Bitcoin virtually instantly, and you it's much quicker.
Okay, you just made it very real for me, because my first year out of college, I went to Europe, got my wallet stolen at one point, and I was in that exact same situation. A Friday afternoon in Italy, not a good time to have your wallet stolen. Oh. Where was Bitcoin?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so one thing that strikes me, it sounds so technical. It seems like that's just one of the obstacles to this kind of general acceptance. Talk a little bit about where it is in its acceptance right now. It seems like geeks love it and get it, and the rest of us, myself included, are like, I need to think about this.
Believe it or not, it's not just for people who wear tinfoil hats. No, I think so. Bitcoin has actually been around for almost 5 years. Most people probably, when they first hear about it, they probably heard about it in the last year, more specifically in March of this year, when there was the bail-in in Cyprus, and that kind of brought it to the large global consciousness
So remind us what happened in March with Cyprus and with Bitcoin.
So basically, Cyprus ran into some financial difficulties, and they froze all bank accounts in the country. And so people literally could not withdraw money or access their euros. And when sort of the dust settled, when it was all said and done, Cyprus effectively did a bail-in where they're going to basically take a haircut to people's deposits. And if let's say you deposited over 100,000 euros, you'll never see anything above that ever again. And there's a lot of people who are keeping money in Cyprus other than Cypriots, people who've thought it was a safe place to store assets. Right. And you can imagine their disappointment with all this. And
yeah,
and
haircut is like, doesn't even begin to cover
yeah, right,
what we're
right.
experiencing in that moment.
Pretty understated.
Right.
But effectively, when that happened, people realized that Bitcoin's an asset that you can't, is basically immune to bail-ins. And the price spiked and really ran up. I think it doubled very quickly. But it wasn't necessarily Cypriots going and buying Bitcoin. What it was really the rest of the world saying, wait, that could happen to me. I better go get myself some Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm. And the underpinnings, the cryptology is very technical, but so is the underpinnings of the internet. Mm-hmm. And people accept that because it's proven itself. So people use email every day, but they don't think about, what protocols is it using, or what exactly is going on in the central servers at Google. But over time, Bitcoin, just like Gmail, people will accept that it works.
And it's partly up to us to try and identify companies and entrepreneurs and help build the ecosystem around it so it does become much more user-friendly. Because today, the user-friendly nature of it's behind. I mean, there's that consciousness, but the rest has to sort of catch up.
Right. Yeah, it does seem like right now there are critics, there are skeptics. There are these incidents like Silk Road, and maybe you can explain briefly what exactly that was, that make people more hesitant about Bitcoin. And I'm wondering how that presents a challenge for you guys to then say, hang on a second, let's put this in context. It's on this trajectory where it's going to happen. This is similar to the internet.
Yeah, I mean, people were skeptical of the internet when it was first around, and people didn't think people would shop online, using Amazon. In fact, Amazon's early days were bumpy. So if there wasn't the skepticism, we'd actually be worried. This is exactly what we'd expect with the new technology. And a lot of people are intimidated by that, but there are a lot of people who aren't, and those people stand to benefit a lot for adopting this early on.
Mm-hmm. All right, give me an idea of the activity with Bitcoin. Like how many, I don't even have an idea of like how many people own Bitcoin right now?
It's a good question. Probably a lot less than people who know about it, because one of the biggest questions we get from people is, how do I pay Bitcoin? And I go, well, A, how much time do you have? And B, how much do you want to buy? Because if you really want to, if you're an institution, for example, and you want to actually invest, or even an individual who wants to put a portion of their assets into Bitcoin like they put into gold, it's the process of buying and storing Bitcoin is difficult. There's actually, ironically, a lot of friction and pain points in that process, whereas Bitcoin is, ultimately, trying to reduce all of those issues as a whole. Buying Bitcoin today is difficult, and we're
briefly. Why is it difficult right now? What makes it so hard to buy?
It's difficult because you basically, for a lot of people, it's a scary idea. This digital money, they like to hold things and see things, and that will, I think, over time go away. But you either have to buy on an exchange, and most of the exchanges are not in the U.S., so that involves wiring money overseas. And then buying it, and then you have to store it. And you can store it in a hot wallet, but there's the risk of hacking. And that exists for your bank account as well, but people have to become more accustomed to it. I think the easiest way to sort of boil it down is that people were reluctant to use their credit cards in the late 90s on the internet. Today, I don't think that's really even a thought in people's minds.
Right.
So Bitcoin will get there, it's just not there yet.
Yeah, if it's bumpy right now in terms of buying it, what does the frictionless transaction look like, I don't know how many years from now, when you're able to get it really easily? When you guys are kind of imagining, okay, it's not going to be this difficult in a few years. What is that going to look like?
So there's already payment processors working now that use the rails of Bitcoin. So you may never see the protocol of Bitcoin, but just like you don't know what's going on when you plug in your credit card, but underneath all of that, the plumbing's actually using a protocol of Bitcoin as opposed to the current banking system.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I was curious about was how I think Germany accepts this as a currency now, and I was wondering how important that is, and is that a tipping point with governments legitimizing Bitcoin? Is this a significant milestone in that acceptance of this currency?
I think that definitely is important, and there's lots of countries that already are okay with multiple currencies. And the FinCEN guidance that came down from the U.S. a couple months ago was also positive. So I think there's risk. You know, some people worry about Bitcoin being too regulated, but I think in reality, it's very much becoming a global asset. And I think within the next 10 years, we may very well see that it looks and feels very much and as mature as other sort of values like gold and the US dollar. And before you sort of say, hey, you're crazy, what are you talking about? Gold's been around for 2,500 years. If you look at gold, it's been around for 2,500 years. If you look at the US dollar, which is considered probably as mature as a store of value, it's been around 221 years, so roughly 8% of the lifespan of gold. So if you look at Bitcoin and it's being 5 years old, 8% of the 221 years is basically 15 to 17 years. So there is a precedent.
You've done your math on this.
Yeah.
I like that. That's
see, I can do some basic algebra 1. But there is a precedent where Bitcoin as a new technology could actually feel and look as mature as a store of value in the next decade. And if you look at and part of that is that technology adoption, the curve's getting steeper and steeper. So if you look at the automobile, it took basically 85 years for 90% of Americans to have, be basically fully saturated with automobiles. The cell phone took about 25, the internet 15. So it's decreasing that time.
Right. Yeah.
And the illegality with Silk Road was grossly overstated from day one. And
so
Silk Road was this place where you could buy illegal things with Bitcoin, and it made for a great story, and it was a narrative that existed in Bitcoin for a long time. Silk Road and its operator were busted, and the FBI has the data, and they published in a complaint, and it turns out that only 4% of the entire volume of Bitcoin went over Silk Road. And so if you think of the shadow economy of the US dollar, it's a lot larger than 4%. And certainly when you go into other countries, it's even in the double digits. So Silk Road, that was actually a big inflection point when that was busted, because it showed that there's so many other uses of for Bitcoin and demand for Bitcoin beyond illegality, and actually a lot more. And the price is actually higher now than it was before the bust.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, just to back up for a minute, how did you guys get interested in Bitcoin in the first place? I mean, did someone pitch you on this? Did you just discover this through your own research? How does one become an investor the way you guys did?
So we were on vacation, not this summer, but the summer before, and ran into a guy from Brooklyn who asked us if we had thought much about virtual currency. And
I thought you were going to say you lost your wallet.
No,
yeah,
yeah,
okay,
that would have made it better, right? But basically, once we started thinking about it, and I guess we were economics majors in college, but hadn't really thought a whole lot about alternative currencies, because prior to Bitcoin, you sort of said the US dollar, that's what I have, and that's what I'll use. And it really, I think the technology aspect of it, the ability to send payments around the world when you lose your wallet or what have you, or the email of money, and then the aspect of the fixed math-based properties of Bitcoin and it being decentralized, which means basically the supply of money in the Bitcoin economy can't be manipulated or mismanaged. So when you have countries like Venezuela or Argentina that have inflation pushing 25%, it's not a wonder why the Bitcoin client in the month of July of this year, the amount doubled, because Argentines are saying, hey, I'm losing all this purchasing power. Bitcoin's a fixed money supply. I'm going to put my pesos and convert them to Bitcoin. So there's a lot of there's economic schools of thought, there's technology, there's innovation. There's so many things about Bitcoin that make it look and feel like this amazing innovation over the next decade, and really, it feels almost like the early days of the internet for us in many ways, and so it's an exciting time.
And as investors, we felt that this is something we just couldn't ignore. I mean, part of our job is to find cool young tech things,
right? And
Bitcoin had so much of that.
And when you talk about it being a fixed amount, it's a market cap right now of over $1 billion,
it's
$1.5 billion?
It depends which exchange,
okay.
But
there's
basically, there's two main exchanges, and we don't have enough time to get into it. But if you basically blend the price, you're looking close to $2 billion in market cap. And when we first started looking at Bitcoin, I think it was at about $100 million worth of market cap. So it's growing quickly. It's still small in terms of a currency, but I think that it's I think the next couple of years will be very interesting to see where it goes.
If you look at the market cap of gold, and when we said before, Bitcoin has the same qualities of gold, but more, then $2 billion is not even a drop in the bucket.
Right. Okay, so let's look 5 or 10 years down the road. What does the Bitcoin usage look like? Am I using it half the time, you know, when I'm doing international work or international travel, or am I using it, has it just completely replaced my tangible physical currency dollars? What do you guys think?
The way we talk usually is, I think in terms of a store of value, it's an alternative that didn't exist. In terms of commerce, I think it'll potentially underpin a lot of transactions that right now are not efficient, are not free, and don't lend well to transactions across borders. So
more international.
Yeah, and also micropayments. So with Fast Company, right, you can dynamically price articles, let's say.
Right.
And let's say I'm willing to pay 5 cents for an article. Right now, there's no way I could do that with PayPal or anything else.
More.
Okay,
right.
$50.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's also, it depends on what vantage point you're looking for. If you're in a third world country, if you're in a country like Zimbabwe with the $1 trillion note, a famous $1 trillion note, it might become the de facto reserve currency for that country. Right. There might be countries who peg their currency to Bitcoin, just like countries peg their currency to gold. So in that standpoint, it becomes a digital gold, and it becomes much larger. But like Cameron said, I think in terms of e-commerce, it underpins and it becomes the rails of all these transactions. And also, in terms of capital controls, it can't be controlled. You'd have to snip the internet wires or shut down the internet to do that. So all of a sudden, it's completely liberating for the entire global financial system.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right, that's a fascinating vision, and I'm still trying to wrap my brain around the implications of all of that. But thanks so much for filling us in on this. Really appreciate it. Let's thank Tyler and Cameron Winklevoss again for coming out.